It all started with a gnome. Not a loud party, not a junk car on cinder blocks, not a herd of feral goats. A single, cheerful, ceramic garden gnome named Barnaby that my 7-year-old daughter won at a school fair. We placed him by the azalea bush, a little red-hatted sentinel of whimsy. For 3 days all was right with the world. Then the letter came. It was on thick, expensive parchment, as if announcing a royal decree rather than a neighborhood grievance. From the desk of the Shady Oaks Homeowners Association. Subject: Unauthorized lawn ornament. Final notice. Dear resident of 1421, Larkspur Lane, it has come to our attention that you are in flagrant violation of Shady Oaks Covenant. Section 4, Paragraph 12. No statuary, figurines, or other non-floral decorative elements shall be placed on any lawn, garden, or visible from the street porch area. You have 24 hours to remove the cited gnome. See attached photograph. Exhibit A. Failure to comply will result in an immediate fine of $250, with recurring daily fines of $50 until the violation is remedied. Sincerely, Brenda McLemore, President, Shady Oaks HOA. Preserving pristine standards since 1985. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. Then I wrote a polite email back, explaining Barnaby's temporary and sentimental nature. I even attached a photo of my daughter, Lily, giving the gnome a thumbs up. The response was swift and brutal. Your emotional attachment to a piece of mass-produced plaster is not our concern. The rules are the rules. The fine has been assessed. The clock is ticking. I paid the fine. I was annoyed, but it wasn't worth the fight. I told Lily that Barnaby was going on a special vacation to the backyard, where the HOA's all seeing I couldn't find him. She was sad but understood. I thought that was the end of it. I was so wrong. A week later, another letter. This one was for my non-conforming flora. My crime? I had planted a section of purple petunias alongside the approved white and red ones. The covenant, apparently, demanded monochromatic or tastefully alternating color schemes. My petunia patch was, according to Brenda, visually chaotic. The fine, $150. This is when the calm, reasonable part of me started to develop a tiny, furious crack. I went to the next HOA meeting. It was held in the community clubhouse, a place that smelled of lemon-scented polish and quiet desperation. Brenda McLemore held court from the head of the table. She was a woman in her late 50s, with a helmet of blonde hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She spoke in a syrupy, condescending tone that made every word feel like an insult. I raised my hand. Brenda, about the petunias. Ms. McLemore during official proceedings, please. She corrected, her smile tightening. Right, Ms. McLemore. The petunias. They're just flowers. They're healthy. They're not chaotic. She steepled her fingers. The covenant is very clear. Aesthetic harmony is the bedrock of our community's property values. Your creative interpretation creates a slippery slope. First, multicolored petunias. Next, a pink house. A few of the other board members, a collection of Brenda sycophants I'd come to think of as the bobbleheads, nodded in solemn agreement. One neighbor, Carl, a nice older man who was just there for the free cookies, gave me a sympathetic shrug. I left the meeting with another fine and a simmering rage. That night, I started a new folder on my computer, HOA documentation. I took photos of my garden, my house, everything. I also did something else. I started reading the Shady Oaks covenants, conditions, and restrictions, CC and RS, from front to back. It was drier than toast, but it was my new Bible. The escalation was breathtaking. Over the next month, I received fines for my mailbox being 3.5 degrees off plumb, according to a photo someone took with a protractor. A single, faded newspaper left on my driveway for 2 hours on a Tuesday. Having my garbage cans at the curb 4 minutes early, before 6 p.m. pickup. I fought everyone with meticulously documented photos and time-stamped evidence. I was becoming a nuisance. I could feel Brenda's irritation growing through the official correspondence, which was now being delivered by certified mail. Then the nuclear option arrived. It wasn't a fine. It was an invitation. You're invited to the wedding of Chloe Macklemore and Aiden at the picturesque property of 1421 Larkspur Lane. Saturday, October 14th, 4 p.m. I read it 3 times. Then I checked the address. It was my address. They had scheduled a wedding at my house for their daughter. My hands were shaking. I called Brenda immediately. Brenda, what is this? Oh, hello. Isn't it wonderful? Chloe just adores your backyard. It's the perfect backdrop for her rustic chic theme. We've already booked the caterer and the string quartet. You can't do that. You can't schedule an event at my private property. She let out a tinkling laugh. Oh, don't be so dramatic. It's in the bylaws, dear. Look it up. Covenant, Section 8, Paragraph 2. The HOA board reserves the right to utilize any and all community property for the betterment and social enrichment of the Shady Oaks community. We deemed Chloe's wedding a community bettering event. We'll need access by 8 a.m. for setup. Do try to have the dog mess cleaned up. I was speechless. The sheer, unadulterated audacity. I hung up and went straight to my computer. Section 8, Paragraph 2. There it was. It was vague, overly broad, and almost certainly unenforceable. But they were banking on me not knowing that, on me just rolling over. That was their fatal mistake. I stopped being just an annoyed homeowner. I became a vengeance-seeking scholar of HOA law. I spent nights researching state statutes on private property rights. I joined online forums filled with people who had HOA horror stories. And I turned my scrutiny onto Brenda Macklemore herself. If she was going to weaponize the bylaws, I was going to learn how to fire them back. I started taking walks every evening, not for pleasure, but for reconnaissance. And I struck gold. Brenda lived in a massive, imposing house at the end of a cul-de-sac. And her property was a treasure trove of violations. Her fence was a full foot taller than the covenant allowed. She had an enormous, unpermitted garden shed that was clearly a non-conforming structure. She had installed landscape lighting that was not approved low voltage, soft glow, but glaring commercial-grade spotlights. And the piece de resistance, a hot tub on her screened-in porch. The covenant explicitly forbade outdoor water features or pools on non-reinforced structures due to weight and liability concerns. The hypocrisy was staggering. I documented it all with a long-lens camera, creating a PowerPoint presentation that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. A week before the scheduled wedding, I sent out my own mailing. To every single homeowner in Shady Oaks, you are cordially invited to a special emergency HOA meeting. Subject: the illegal use of private property and systemic board hypocrisy. Place: Community Clubhouse. Time: Saturday, October 14th, 3:30 p.m. Please note, this meeting will directly precede the wedding that the HOA has illegally scheduled at my home. Refreshments will be provided. Asterisk. I then called the local news station's Help Me Hank consumer advocacy segment. I emailed a local land use attorney. I was building my own little army. The neighborhood exploded. My phone rang off the hook. Carl, the cookie guy, was furious on my behalf. It turned out a lot of people had quietly suffered under Brenda's reign. The day before the wedding, I made one more phone call to a heavy equipment rental company. Hi, I said, my voice calm and steady. I'd like to rent a Bulldozer, a D6 if you have it, for tomorrow. Saturday, October 14th, arrived. At 3:15 p.m., a massive yellow Bulldozer was delivered and parked, very legally, on the street in front of my house. The driver, a guy named Tony who looked immensely confused, but was being paid triple time, sat in the cab. At 3:30 p.m., the clubhouse was packed. Every chair was filled, people were standing along the walls. Brenda was at the front, her face a mask of cold fury. The local news crew was setting up in the back. This is highly irregular, Brenda spat into the microphone. And that vehicle outside is a clear violation of. I stood up, holding a flash drive. Point of order, Ms. Macklemore, I said, my voice echoing in the dead silent room. I'd like to make a presentation. Before she could object, I plugged the drive into the clubhouse TV. The first slide popped up, "Do as I say, not as I do. A study in hypocrisy." I took them through it slide by glorious slide. The illegal fence, the unpermitted shed, the glaring lights, and finally the hot tub of doom. Gasps filled the room. The camera lights were on, broadcasting her panicked expression to the entire Tri-County area. "This is trespassing. Slander," she shrieked. "It's all taken from public property," I said calmly. "And it's all documented in the bylaws you are charged with upholding. You have fined me hundreds of dollars for a garden gnome and petunias, while you yourself are in violation of at least a dozen major covenants." The room erupted. People started shouting their own grievances. Carl stood up and yelled, "I move for a vote of no confidence in the entire board." It was chaos. Beautiful, righteous chaos. Then I delivered the final blow. "And as for the wedding you scheduled at my house today," I said, nodding toward the window, "I've decided to do some last-minute landscaping to prepare." "Tony." From the clubhouse window, we all watched as Tony, on my instruction, started the bulldozer. It roared to life with a deafening diesel growl. He didn't drive it onto my property, of course. That would have been illegal. He just sat there, the engine rumbling, a 5-ton threat idling in the street. The wedding planner, who had just arrived, took one look at the bulldozer and the news van and sped off. Chloe McLemore started to cry. The fallout was swift and satisfying. Brenda McLemore was immediately removed as president by a unanimous vote of the homeowners present. The entire board resigned in disgrace. The land use attorney I'd contacted helped us formally void the wedding clause and several other ridiculous bylaws. We held a proper election. Carl, the cookie guy, is now our HOA president. His first act was to officially grant a gnome amnesty, retroactively absolving Barnaby of all crimes. His second was to disband the aesthetic committee. My yard is now a glorious, chaotic mess of multicolored petunias. Barnaby stands proudly by the azaleas, and I've added a few of his ceramic friends. My mailbox is still a little crooked, and I wouldn't have it any other way. As for the bulldozer, Tony drove it away after an hour. I paid the rental fee, and it was worth every single penny. It wasn't about destruction. It was a symbol. A big, yellow, diesel-powered symbol that said, "You can only push reasonable people so far. Sometimes, to preserve your own little patch of peace, you have to be willing to park a bulldozer out front." And honestly, I'd do it again in a heartbeat.